Good evening. Tonight's topic is going to be a look ahead quite a bit in time. And what we want to talk or discuss about or think about tonight is if we get rid of our dependency on fossil fuels to reduce carbon emissions. And what kind of global impact this is going to have. Now, let's just take, hypothetical speaking, we're at the point today that we don't need any oil, any natural gas, any gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel, or any of this stuff. We have reached basically the point of carbon neutrality. Technically, I could power my house here with photovoltaic panels. I could purchase an electric vehicle and charge that vehicle with the power generated, the electricity generated from the photovoltaic panels. The technology is there. I can buy the parts I need and put it together, or have someone come here and put it together, and I would be off-grid, fully self-sustained on photovoltaic power. I may have to spend $30,000-$40,000 to get a system going here in the location I'm at, in the size it would require, the amount of photovoltaic panels and the batteries to have the overnight storage and that sort of stuff, but it's quite possible. I could then heat, cool, cook, have hot water in my house and charge my vehicle, and I wouldn't need to buy anything. I wouldn't have an electric bill anymore. I wouldn't have a gas bill anymore. I wouldn't have to pay gasoline or diesel, none of this stuff. So I would be, as a single person, fully energy independent of anyone on this planet except for the sun. I could add a couple wind turbines to it to make up for those days when it is more cloudy, and we have more wind. Then you have a fully redundant system. And at this point, I would be hunky-dunky-dory. I could care less who does what, if they're going to raise the taxes on this thing or the other thing, gasoline taxes, fossil fuel taxes, none of this stuff would matter. The technology is there and available to us. Now, if we have 335 million people here in the United States, if every person were to do this, or every household would do this, the oil market here in the United States, the gasoline market, would literally collapse. So would the electric companies, because there would be almost no need anymore for an electric grid or for power generation on a larger scale to begin with. The consequences out of this would be tremendous, because all of this money I spent on energy would be now redirected, or a portion of this, to maintain my own power generating equipment I have at home, and the upkeep of my battery in my electric vehicle. That is pretty much the maintenance, care and maintenance for those items primarily. But anything fuel-related is out the window. That means the governments, the state, the local governments are no longer getting tax revenue from my diesel purchases, from my gasoline purchases, from the driving I do, any of that stuff with registration is different, because you no longer have any things associated with that. There wouldn't be any more exhaust tests, smoke tests for the vehicle, because it's not gas powered. I would not be paying any taxes anymore on gas I'm getting for my house, natural gas or liquefied gas. All of this tax revenue is lost, and that goes into hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in the United States. Besides this, the oil fields are going to close down. The refineries here, whatever we have left in the United States, are going to close down. The people who work in these jobs, they're going to lose their jobs. And the oil who's going to get imported, say like from Saudi Arabia or out of the Middle East, they're not seeing the fat checks anymore they used to get from us. Now, in Europe, it's a similar situation where a lot of this money they spent goes to Russia. Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, these countries there, Georgia is getting a cut out of the pipeline. Ukraine is making money on it. All of this would die down. None of these countries would see any money at all anymore. The Russian Federation gets 55%, I believe it is. It's over 50%. Not exactly sure how much. Say 55% of their government funding through Rosneft and Gazprom, because they own a certain share out of these companies, the majority. So that money goes directly as substitution for tax collection into the federal budget in the Russian Federation. The other 45% come from primarily Russian taxpayers and whatever fees the Russian Federation assesses on licenses, passports, and all of that stuff, whatever there's a fee associated with government services. If you take 55% out of a country's budget, either slowly or abruptly, either way, it's a loss. You can do that one thing, that's what the United States has been doing, is run with an annual deficit. That means you tell your Treasury Secretary to basically print money, you issue notes, and you make up the deficiency. And here in the United States, this is anywhere, and it has been now for decades, anywhere between $500 billion to $1 trillion a year. That is usually the shortfall in tax revenue, or the income for the federal government, which is about 20% or so, 25%, 15%. It varies from year to year, depending on how much money they're spending in Washington. Now, in the situation with the Russian Federation, that income would be 55% for the government is lost, is gone. So they have now three options. They can do the same thing what the United States does and run on a deficit. That means they have to print money or sell basically treasury notes for 55% of the shortfall, which would go probably close into a $500 billion to $1 trillion range there too, which is a lot of money, and you can do this. And of course, your debt is just going to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, similar to what we're having here in the United States. They can go ahead and ask the Russian citizens to step up by basically more than doubling their current tax payments. Whatever tax payment there is, you basically multiply it by 2. Or fees. And the third option is, well, there really is not much more they can do. They can downscale. The third option, downscaling government spending to match this what they're actually getting from the Russian citizens as tax payments and fees for services rendered by the government. That would leave them with a 45% spending ability of what they had currently. So your military is falling apart, your streets are going to fall apart, basically everything is going to fall apart. The country wouldn't be running on a deficit on the government side. They wouldn't sustain any debt levels, but the spending on infrastructure and whatever the government provides in Russia is going to be greatly hampered. And it's going to be at a 45% level of what they have so far. So now this is only Russia. Now we have to look at other countries, And there's going to be a similar story. In some countries, it is even 80% of oil revenue, which pays for the governments in those countries. And once this is all going to unfold, all of this lost revenue, for one, is we're going to be doing a lot better in Europe and here in the United States and in Canada and in Mexico, whoever does the carbon neutral thing, is because we're no longer sending money abroad. So the trade balances are going to shrink down to a zero level, possibly. That's good for us because we're retaining more dollars here in the United States or in Europe, euros, and that circulates then in the local economy, in the national economy, rather than going abroad and not coming back as exports from the US or exports from Europe. So our standard of living actually is going to increase as a result out of this, while all the oil-producing countries are going to see a significant decrease in the standard of living. That is the flip side of the coin in this whole thing. Now, I watched some videos earlier this afternoon. Saturdays is a good day to watch. I watch mostly documentaries. And I found a history on the, Russian, Soviet Union, Russian oil businesses in the first place, on how this went from the Soviet Union and what reserves they have, where and what part of their country, what was in the former parts of the Soviet Union. And I also found out that the Ukraine has a substantial area of natural gas right in that Donbass region up to Belarus, on that northeastern corner there, and down in the Black Sea area, port area, right around Odessa to Mariupol. I guess you can pronounce it either way. And of course, that is all kind of closed off right now by the Russians. But in the long run, it wouldn't make any difference, because if the European Union goes over to being carbon neutral, then they have no more need for that Ukrainian gas. The Ukraine maybe itself may use some of it until they have transitioned to a carbon neutral state. But basically, the stuff is worthless. How fast we can accomplish this, I don't know. I'm looking at my electric bill. I'm looking at my gas bill. I have options, and I have the technical know-how to determine the size of the system I will need and everything else that comes with it. And I have found, reasonable sources, cost sources on used panels which are sold, photovoltaic panels which are sold by the larger commercial electricity producers. They usually keep these new photovoltaic panels for about 4 years to 5 years, and then they sell them as used at about 20% of the cost of a new panel, but only with about 85% power output. So what you do is basically, in the scenario, if you need technically 10 panels working at 100%, you just get 15 or 18 panels, which is still then only 40% of the cost of the 10 panels is used, and you have a bigger power reserves, and they will last than 25 years. Photovoltaic panels lose the power output ability over time, and their first significant drop comes after 5 years and 10 years, when they have been exposed to UV light, to UV sources from the sun. And here in the more northern hemisphere, they probably last a little bit longer, where in the southern regions or in a desert environment, they will basically use themselves up faster, and they have a lower power output then. But you can just compensate by using more. Basically, you just double the amount of panels. So if a system would cost me 20% if I need 10 panels at 100% and I can get 10 panels for 20% used 5 years old, and I double the amount of panels, I'm paying then 40% of the new, but I have doubled, or I have at least 85% of 200%. And that is a lot more than 85% of 100%. You know? So 85% of 200% would be, say, like if I go 10 kilowatts and 20 kilowatts, that would be then about 16 to 18 kilowatts. So I have now a much larger system. I can get more batteries, and I have a very comfort level in this. I have now an oversized system at 40% of the cost if I would buy a correctly sized system with new panels. That is the way you can achieve energy independence very quickly. That is something I have been looking at. I like my car, and I think I'm going to keep my car as an old-timer. My car is 33 years old, and I'm very happy with it. I've worked every kink out of it. It is running. I have 336,000 miles on it, all original, and I will keep it until either I go or the car goes. Either one of us, maybe we go together. Who knows? I hope not. But that is basically it. Now, back to our scenario here with all these countries in the Middle East and over there in the Central Asian region, right there around Turkey and Russia and Iran, in that block over there, and then the Ukraine, of what they're going to do when they lose that revenue. And that's going to be the conflict zones of the futures. Now, the video I watched earlier tonight about the pipelines and oil and gas explorations in Russia and the Soviet Union, they said that now what I wanted to say was with the pipelines in Russia. So the exploration, now I lost my thought. I have to apologize for this. That happens now and then. Let's see if I can recuperate. I watched this, and my God, now I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, when they're gonna lose this, the entire economy over there, which is basically based on that, is going to come to a standstill. The Russian Federation now and the Soviet Union always have started a war or a conflict during the time, that's actually where I lost my thought, where I needed to pick up. Whenever the oil prices were going up, when they were starting to peak, that was with Afghanistan, started with the second oil shock. And then came Chechnya and all the Georgia, all these conflicts, and now the Ukraine, and then, to the Middle East over there, Syria, their involvement there and their involvement in Africa, always came during peaks of oil prices on the, commodities markets. So whenever Russia felt like it, that oil was very expensive and everyone was depending upon their oil, they were able to do these kind of military actions. Now, theoretically, you would think that Russia, or any other nation for that matter, would not be doing anything militarily when the oil price is depressed, since it is the main revenue for them, or if they have no more money coming in. So our strive for energy independence, whether you want to save the global climate, global climate changes, or whatever your aspirations are on this, or you want to save money like I do, by not blowing it up someone else's behind, basically, that would be now the time to implement it. The question is how these countries are going to react to this. The only country which has taken an active, foresighted planning on this, is the United Arab Emirates. They have been shifting their entire economy away from oil income. They are developing high-tech centers. They want semiconductor manufacturers there, technology companies, AI, artificial intelligence is being developed over there. Universities, that is their thing, as they have gone in a completely different directions away to sustain their local economy. You can say this in Russia. The Saudi Arabia is not there. There's other countries. Dubai is not there. Um, Iran hasn't done anything. Iraq has not done anything. None of the real big oil countries have done anything. Here in the United States, those people who work in the oil fields and, in the oil producing environment, refinery environment and all of the stuff, they will have to find other jobs. It won't be a tremendous impact, but the government will feel it because of the loss in tax revenues. That's for sure. That is written in the books already. They will come up with something to make up for that shortfall. And the question is, how is Russia going to deal with this? Now, China, on the other hand, is still very fossil fuel dependent, but they are having major programs underway to go to solar or photovoltaic panels and windmills. I don't think there's any other country on the planet at this point where photovoltaic panels especially are being incorporated in virtually every new building they're building on a large scale. They're building entire photovoltaic power plants for cities on large, very large scales. And the same is with windmills. These windmills are even larger than what we got here. And all of the domestic Chinese car manufacturers, no matter how good or bad quality-wise they might be, they're all offering electric vehicles. Even though for buses and that stuff, for public transportation. And all of their railroad is electrified. So they're shifting this from coal-based electricity production, overall to nuclear. And their primary idea was not so much because they don't believe that they're going to save the planet with this, but they want that energy independence from Saudi Arabia, and they don't want to get into that with the Russians. That's why there is virtually no pipelines at this point for anything from the Russian Federation over into China or into Mongolia. And India is in a similar situation, especially India, with all the sunshine they have. This is an optimum candidate for photovoltaic panels. So this is coming. There's no question about it. You can, like I said, you can do it because you want to save the world. There's some other people, they may do it because it's just the right thing to do, or they feel like it. I do it because I like to be independent. I like to be energy independent, and I like to be off-grid. So this way I'm not dependent upon the electric companies and the government and everything else what comes with it. It couldn't be any better than that, that's for sure. But I will say one thing is, and that is the thought we have to think about it. What is Russia going to do? What are those Central Asian countries are going to do, which have put all their cards on fossil fuels, of exporting fossil fuels, and their entire prosperity, which they have enjoyed now for the last good 20 years, those days are basically numbered in the national economies over there. What are they going to do? Is Russia going to start a war? Is the Ukraine just the beginning? What is the Ukraine going to be able to do? Well, they found that oil and primarily that natural gas. 4 different Western oil companies or energy companies moved in there. They spent $10 billion on that, on the exploration on this stuff. And of course, that was all blown out of proportion once the Russian Federation moved into Crimea and the Donbass conflict basically started to take shape, because it is exactly in that region where the gas fields are. So some people say this war now between the Ukraine and the Russian Federation is about this gas. That might be partially true, but the days are so numbered in this that I would not even think about it twice of looking at this as a lottery win with what they have discovered there. Because if we're going to go through with what we say we're going to go through, and we become energy independent and we're going away from fossil fuels, all of this means nothing, basically. That's kind of where I'm at with this stuff, you know. For me, really, the motive is primarily energy independent as a private person. And I can afford it. I can do it, you know. I was just waiting for the technology to come along far enough to be reliably working for many years, so you don't have to constantly fix things. And like I said, is with the second-hand panels, when they're oversized, they will work fine for many, many years to come. I may have to change them. If I buy these panels now and they last me 25 years, I'm gonna be 80 years old at that point. I do not know if I'm gonna see 80 or not. In 25 years, this is close to, we're almost done in 2050. We're going to be 2050 minus 2047. It looks like so far away, but it really isn't, because 25 years is not a lot of time. So this is the kind of thing I wanted to share with you. And I think the geopolitical problems we're going to experience is especially with those countries who are primarily exporters, where the country, the entire nation, basically depends upon fossil fuel exports one way, form, shape, or the other. Except minus United Arab Emirates, because they are prepared for this and they have been preparing for this for the last 20 years. So that is one country we won't have to worry about it. But we will see what the Middle East is going to do, and we will see what Putin and the Russian Federation is going to do. He can drink then his oil, and then he can smoke his gas. Well, can't really do that. It's probably going to explode. But this is basically the overall situation in this. And as more as we transition into this, as more these sales are going to decrease, you know. And that will have an impact. This is going to be a long downhill path in most of these countries where they have gone up in prosperity, and the prosperity is going to slowly erode into whatever they were before the oil exports started or the natural gas exports started. This is going to create conflicts, and it's going to create social, economic issues globally. And we have to see on how we want to deal with this. I think the war in Russia, between Russia and the Ukraine, was the first taste for us Western world people of what there is to come. And as more as we're shifting over to alternative energies and energy independence, as more we're going to see these conflicts erupt. This is basically just food for thought. I cannot tell you exactly of what is going to happen now, where and how this is going to play out, but there will be some form of consequences in this. And these nations will not take this lightly with us going over into energy independence. And that's all I wanted to share with you here tonight. And maybe you can think about it and see what you make out of it. And with that, you have a great evening.